And the last point is the one I made about the Shari'i concepts. They cannot be translated, they're in Arabic. Whenever we use English terms, it comes with its own Western and Christian baggage. There's nothing wrong with using them, but it's something that we have to be not only open to, but we have to be aware of. So what is politics? Yes, of course.
The phrase Sharia requires an imagination. From what I've understood, you've just said there, you're saying the study of Sharia inevitably involves people thinking subjectively about the future. Is that what you're saying? Or
sorry, that's a bit reductive there. So if I was to put that more pedantically, perhaps, thinking about the Sharia, so thinking about the Sharia in practice.
Okay, so you're not saying a person ought to use his imagination whilst engaging with the Sharia as well, I mean.
I think it's such a necessary aspect of that process to say normatively whether you should or you shouldn't becomes irrelevant.
Okay.
You're going to have to.
It's inevitable.
It's inevitable. Yeah, it's inevitable. Right? Like Al-Ghazali says in his book on Qiyas, 9/10 of fiqh is aqli.
But then would there be a need for imagination, especially like optimism requires imagination?
Oh yes. Yes, I do believe that's the case. And that's what I refer to when I talk about being, what's the word? I used it earlier with a C. Not convincing. Wow, my head's gone blank. When I'm talking about how we do things and we think of new ways. Creative, that was the word I used. When, for example, being creative with what God tells us to do and finding solutions. That requires an imagination. My argument would be the fuqaha, are like the most imaginative people on the face of the earth. Historians have an imagination, right? So for example, you're looking at history, You're not given, like even the seerah itself, right, as history. You don't know every second of the Prophet's life. Or anything you might be looking at. You might be looking at the history of Belgium in 1600s, or Flemish history, or whatever the case might be. You weren't there. You're looking at sources, but those sources, you have one source from this year and one source from next year. As a historian, obviously, there are variables that will help guide your imagination, but you have to put together a narrative and a story that's reasonable, given the variables that you have in place and the markers, to build a narrative. We weren't there in the time of Adam. So any theologian that comes along is building a narrative of the earliest times of human history. He's still using his imagination. There are gaps in the sources that they have to fill in. And very reasonably, one historian will fill in that gap in a slightly different way to another historian. And that's why historians differ. So it's not just in this, it's in any kind of thinking, in any form of theory, in any form of cognitive exercise. You're going to have to use your imagination, and Allah wants this. This is what the aql is there for. But you do so then someone will say, but where's the benchmark? As in, how do you know you're not going wrong? Well, the first principle is what? Be Rabbani. If you're not Rabbani, so if you're going to take your religion for people who aren't Rabbani, this is the problem you're going to fall into. The parts that require imagination are going to be wild and very far from what God wants, because what God wants is not what? Is not a factor of consideration when they are building the narrative. I have no problem with non-Muslim Islamic academics, like in universities. They've got some really good insights. But taking your deen from them, meaning taking knowledge that is meant to be action guiding, is very problematic. Why? Because of this. I've got no problem with a lot of these online scholars and muftis and sheikhs and da'is. On a personal level, I just don't care. I'm not even that invested. When somebody comes to me and says, shall I take my religion from them? I explain this to them. This is what it is. This is what's required. That this person strike you. It's not that I make a judgment. I let you make the judgment. But this person strike you as somebody who cares about the bigger picture and what God wants. Yeah, they've got nice little opinions on fiqh. They've got nice little opinions on Aqidah, but do they understand the bigger picture and what God wants? And if they don't, then be very wary, because where their imagination has run wild and being creative, as it should be, is not being creative in the right direction. That's where the problem occurs. And that's why you need people who are scholars that have fatana, who have intelligence, who are creative, phenomenal minds. But godliness is key.